Lila Harper, a determined young woman in her mid-20s, lived in a neglected neighborhood on the outskirts of Detroit, where peeling paint and broken streetlights painted a stark picture of struggle. Life had never been easy for Lila, who bore the weight of her family's survival on her slender shoulders. Her mother, once a vibrant and loving presence, was now confined to their small apartment by a chronic illness that drained their limited resources. Each day, Lila faced the daunting challenge of providing care for her mother while also looking out for her younger brother, Mason, whose teenage years were marked by a mix of rebellion and quiet hope for a brighter future. Lila juggled two exhausting minimum-wage jobs, mornings at a bustling coffee shop and late-night shifts at a dimly lit diner. Despite her relentless effort, she barely managed to make ends meet, often skipping meals to stretch their meager income. She dreamed of a life far beyond the crumbling walls of their apartment, of opportunities that would lift her family out of their dire circumstances. Yet, each time she thought of breaking free, the chains of debt, medical bills, and her family's dependence on her pulled her back. The cycle felt endless, and though she clung to hope, it was often overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of helplessness. One rainy evening, the kind where the drizzle seemed to soak straight to the bone, Lila trudged home after another grueling shift at the diner. The streets were nearly deserted, the usual hum of life dampened by the weather. Her path took her through a small, overgrown park she rarely noticed, a shortcut she only used when desperation to rest overtook her. The faint sound of trickling water drew her attention, and she turned to see an old, ivy-covered well tucked into the shadows of the trees. Its presence was unexpected, almost out of place, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. She hesitated, curiosity piqued despite her fatigue, and approached cautiously. Sitting beside the well was an elderly man with a kind but weathered face. His posture relaxed as though he belonged there. His clothes, though simple, had an air of neatness that contrasted with the disarray of the surroundings. As Lila drew closer, he greeted her with a warm, knowing smile and spoke of the well's mystical powers, claiming it granted wishes to those who truly believed. His words were soft yet carried a weight that made her pause. Lila couldn't suppress a small laugh, shaking her head at the absurdity of the idea. Yet, there was something about Mr. Bennett, his calm confidence, the twinkle in his eye, that left her intrigued. Though she didn't believe him, she found herself lingering, feeling an odd sense of comfort in the man's presence and the mysterious aura surrounding the forgotten well. Later that night, as the city settled into the quiet hum of late hours, Lila found herself unable to shake the thought of the old well and Mr. Bennett's cryptic words. The rain had subsided, leaving the streets damp and shimmering under the glow of streetlights. Despite her exhaustion, she felt an unexplainable pull drawing her back to the park. Her footsteps were hesitant, her heart heavy with the weight of her family's struggles and her own dwindling hope. Clutching her last quarter tightly in her hand, she approached the well, its silhouette shadowy and strange under the faint moonlight. The air around it seemed still, almost expectant, as if waiting for her arrival. Lila stood there for a moment, the chill of the night creeping through her thin jacket as she gazed down into the darkness of the well. Her fingers trembled as she pressed the coin between her palms, whispering a wish barely audible in the silence. She didn't ask for riches or a life of luxury, just the strength to keep going and the chance for something better. The quarter slipped from her fingers, its faint clink echoing as it disappeared into the depths below. Lila lingered, waiting for, what? A sign? A feeling? She didn't know. When nothing happened, she sighed, half laughing at her own foolishness. Yet, as she turned to leave, a strange calmness settled over her. The crushing weight she carried each day felt just a little lighter, as if, for a moment, She had allowed herself to believe that change was possible. Walking home, she felt a small flicker of something unfamiliar, hope. The next day at the diner, Lila was in her usual rhythm, balancing trays and pouring coffee, her exhaustion masked by a practiced smile. Among the stream of customers was a woman who caught her attention with an air of quiet sophistication. Claire Whitman sat at a corner booth, her sharp eyes observing everything with an almost artistic precision. After her meal, Claire lingered, watching as Lila absently sketched on a napkin during a brief lull in her shift. It wasn't unusual for Lila to doodle during quieter moments. Her drawings were often simple escapes into creativity, nothing she thought much of. But to Claire, those casual lines held something extraordinary. When Claire called her over, Lila expected a complaint about the food or service, not the soft yet enthusiastic admiration for her art. Claire introduced herself as the owner of a small art gallery downtown, her voice filled with warmth and genuine interest. She spoke passionately about discovering untapped talent, encouraging Lila to consider showcasing her work. Lila froze, disbelief coursing through her. No one had ever called her talented before, let alone suggested her work belonged anywhere but the back of a napkin. Doubts surfaced immediately. How could a waitress from a struggling family possibly belong in the world of art galleries? But Claire's words weren't dismissive or pitying. They were infused with belief and excitement. For the first time in years, Lila felt a flicker of potential within herself. A small but powerful spark ignited by someone else's unwavering confidence in her abilities. It was terrifying, yet something in her heart whispered that this might be the beginning of something different, something more. Just as the fragile glimmer of hope began to take root in Lila's life, the ground beneath her seemed to crumble once more. A call from the local police station interrupted her brief moment of joy. Mason had been caught shoplifting at a nearby convenience store. The news hit her like a punch to the stomach. She rushed to the station, her mind a storm of worry and frustration. Mason sat sullenly in the corner of the waiting area, his usual defiance tinged with guilt as he avoided her gaze. The store owner hadn't pressed charges, but the bail and fines were a blow to their already strained finances. With a heavy heart, Lila handed over the last of her savings, the money she had quietly set aside for art supplies and a chance to take up Claire's offer. The ride home was tense, the silence between them thick with unspoken words. Lila wanted to scream, to demand why Mason had risked so much for so little, but she saw the desperation in his eyes. The same desperation she battled every day. He admitted he'd stolen to help, to provide something extra for their mother, tired of watching Lila shoulder everything. His reasoning didn't ease the ache in her chest. That night, as she sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at the crumpled bills that remained, Lila felt utterly defeated. The walls of their small apartment seemed to close in on her, the weight of their circumstances pressing heavier than ever. She wondered if escape was even possible, or if they were destined to keep sinking no matter how hard she fought to rise. At her lowest point, when the weight of her family's struggles seemed almost unbearable, Lila found herself wandering aimlessly through the dimly lit streets. The cool night air felt heavy, mirroring the suffocating doubt and despair clouding her thoughts. Without realizing it, her steps carried her back to the park, to the spot where the mysterious well rested in its forgotten corner. She stopped abruptly when she saw a familiar figure sitting beside it. Mr. Bennett, his posture relaxed as if he'd been expecting her. His presence, calm and unshaken, was both unsettling and oddly comforting. He greeted her with a knowing smile, his eyes twinkling under the faint light of the moon. This time, his words were even more enigmatic. He spoke of the well's power, explaining that its magic only revealed itself to those who truly believed in their dreams, who had the courage to chase them despite the odds. Lila frowned, her skepticism evident. She questioned whether dreams mattered when survival itself was a daily battle. Mr. Bennet didn't argue, but simply urged her to think about what she truly wanted, not just for her family, but for herself. His words lingered long after he disappeared into the shadows, leaving Lila alone with her thoughts. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life beyond the grind, a future where her art and passions had a place. The idea was fragile, like a flickering candle in the wind, but it sparked something deep within her, a sense of possibility that hadn't existed before. Encouraged by Claire's unexpected belief in her, Lila began spending her late nights sketching at the small kitchen table, her only source of light a dim bulb above. With Mason asleep and their mother resting in the next room, the silence allowed her mind to wander freely. At first, her drawings were simple, landscapes, patterns, and scenes she had seen in her daily life. But as she worked, her art began to take on a new life, weaving subtle stories into the images. She sketched a girl standing at a crossroads under a stormy sky, a child gazing at a cracked but hopeful sunrise, and a small bird learning to fly in the face of a roaring wind. Each stroke of her pencil felt like a release, a way to channel emotions she had long suppressed while navigating the unrelenting demands of survival. With each passing night, Lila found herself more immersed in her creations. She started to see her sketches as more than just random doodles. They were pieces of her, fragments of dreams and feelings she hadn't dared to voice. Her work became a quiet form of storytelling, a reflection of the resilience and longing that had defined her life. She found joy in the process, a rare feeling she hadn't experienced in years. Though her body ached from long shifts at work, her heart felt lighter as she compiled her growing collection into a makeshift portfolio. For the first time, she allowed herself to hope that her art could be more than an escape. It could be a way forward, a path she hadn't imagined but was now beginning to see. After weeks of late-night sketching and quiet self-doubt, Lila finally mustered the courage to bring her portfolio to Claire. The moment she walked into Claire's small but elegant gallery, her palms were slick with sweat, and her heart pounded in her chest. She hesitated, clutching the folder tightly, half expecting Claire to dismiss her work as amateur or unpolished. But as Claire flipped through the pages, her expressions shifted. Her eyes lit up, her smile widened, and she occasionally nodded as if in deep agreement with something unspoken in the art. Lila watched in awe as Claire studied each piece with genuine appreciation, pointing out the subtle narratives and emotions Lila had woven into her work. For the first time, Lila felt seen, not as a struggling waitress but as an artist with a voice. Claire set the portfolio down with a decisive smile and offered Lila a spot in an upcoming local gallery exhibit, a showcase for emerging artists. Lila's heart leapt, but so did her anxiety. She stammered, unsure if she was ready, if her work could stand beside the creations of others with more experience and confidence. Claire's reassurances were calm but firm. This was her chance to be heard, to let her talent speak for itself. Despite her nerves, Lila accepted, knowing deep down that opportunities like this were rare. As she left the gallery, a mix of fear and excitement churned within her. She realized this wasn't just an opportunity to showcase her art. It was the first real step toward building the life she had only dared to dream about. The day of the exhibit arrived, and the gallery buzzed with activity as artists and visitors prepared for the evening's opening. Lila arrived early, her heart racing with a mix of anticipation and fear. But as she approached her designated corner of the gallery, her breath caught in her throat. Her artwork, the pieces she had poured her heart into, was ruined, torn, smeared, and defaced with cruel, careless marks. She stood frozen, disbelief and anguish washing over her. Someone had deliberately sabotaged her work, and the sight of her efforts destroyed felt like a personal attack on her dreams. Hot tears pricked at her eyes, and all the confidence she had painstakingly built crumbled in an instant. Thoughts of quitting flooded her mind. After all, she reasoned bitterly, maybe she didn't belong here. Claire found Lila slumped against the wall, her devastated expression speaking louder than words. Without hesitation, she knelt beside her, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. Claire's voice was firm but kind as she reminded Lila that every artist faces setbacks. Sometimes out of malice, sometimes out of misfortune. What mattered, Claire said, was how Lila chose to respond. Together, they assessed the damage and found that while some pieces were beyond saving, others could be repaired with effort and creativity. Under Claire's guidance, Lila reworked what she could, adding new layers to her art that transformed the scars into stories of resilience. That evening, as the gallery filled with visitors, Lila's work stood proudly, not as she had originally intended, but as a testament to her determination. Despite her fears, she found the courage to speak about her art, earning not only admiration but also newfound strength in herself. As the evening progressed, Lila nervously hovered near her artwork, unsure how the visitors would react to the salvaged pieces she had worked so hard to present. She avoided eye contact, trying to shrink into the background while conversations buzzed around her. Suddenly, an older gentleman with a sharp suit and an air of quiet authority approached her corner of the gallery. He studied her work intently, his gaze lingering on a particular piece, a sketch of a bird breaking free from a tangled nest. His expression was thoughtful, almost reverent, as if he saw something beyond the image itself. Lila's breath caught when he turned to her with a warm smile, introducing himself as Mr. Sullivan, a collector with a deep appreciation for emerging artists. Mr. Sullivan expressed his admiration for the emotional depth in her work, commenting on how it conveyed both struggle and hope in a way that resonated deeply with him. His words carried no hint of pretense, only genuine respect for her talent. To her astonishment, he expressed interest in purchasing the piece, explaining that it reminded him of his own journey towards success. The transaction felt surreal as she handed over the framed sketch, watching it leave her hands and become part of someone else's story. For the first time, Lila felt a sense of value not tied to her struggles or responsibilities but to the art she had created. Mr. Sullivan's encouragement to pursue her talent further stayed with her long after the exhibit ended, planting a seed of belief that perhaps her dreams weren't as impossible as they once seemed. Lila's fragile sense of hope was tested once again when her mother's health took a sharp decline. Late-night phone calls from the hospital became a new routine, each one bringing updates that seemed to erode what little stability they had left. The bills began to mount, an unrelenting reminder of their precarious situation. Lila's mind raced with calculations and grim possibilities, wondering how she could stretch her limited income to cover the escalating costs. Her dreams of pursuing art, the faint light at the end of her tunnel, began to feel like a luxury she couldn't afford. Night after night, she sat at the kitchen table, staring at her sketchpad but unable to draw. The weight of her responsibilities pressed heavily on her, whispering that giving up on her art and taking on another job was the only way forward. One evening, as Lila sat in silence, lost in a sea of worry, Mason placed a hand on her shoulder. His usual teenage bravado was replaced with quiet determination as he told her they would find a way through this together. He admitted that seeing her pursue her art had inspired him, and now it was his turn to help. Mason promised to pick up extra shifts at the electronics repair shop where he worked part-time, insisting that she not abandon the one thing that made her come alive. His words brought tears to Lila's eyes, a mix of gratitude and guilt flooding her heart. Though she still felt the crushing weight of their reality, Mason's belief in her gave her a glimmer of strength. For the first time, she realized that her dreams weren't just hers. They were a beacon for her family, a reminder that hope could exist even in their darkest moments. Days after what felt like endless battles with mounting medical bills, Lila was startled to receive a call from the hospital. She braced herself for more bad news, but instead, the voice on the other end informed her that her mother's outstanding balance had been paid in full. The words didn't register at first. She asked the receptionist to repeat them, convinced she had misheard. When the truth sank in, a flood of relief washed over her, mixed with confusion and disbelief. Who could have done this? The caller didn't have details, only that the payment was made anonymously. The news left Lila dazed, her heart pounding with a mix of gratitude and suspicion. It felt like a miracle, arriving at the moment she needed it most. As she tried to unravel the mystery, her thoughts turned to Mr. Bennett, the enigmatic man from the well. His cryptic words and sudden disappearance after their last encounter made him a likely candidate in her mind. Yet, she had no proof, and the possibility of him orchestrating such a gesture only deepened the mystery surrounding him. Lila couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, believed in her and her family's worth enough to offer this lifeline. Though her skepticism lingered, she allowed herself a moment of quiet gratitude. Whoever the benefactor was, their act of kindness gave her a chance to breathe, to focus on her art and her family without the constant weight of financial despair. It felt as though the universe was offering her a reprieve, a reminder that even in her darkest moments, she wasn't entirely alone. One afternoon, as Lila went over the details of her recent sales, she noticed discrepancies in the amounts she had received. Confused, she retraced the transactions, her heart sinking as she realized a portion of the earnings was missing. After digging deeper, she discovered that Claire had been taking an unagreed cut of her sales without ever mentioning it. The realization stung more than she expected. Claire had been the first person to believe in her talent, the one who opened the door to a world she had only dreamed of. Lila had trusted her completely, and now that trust felt shattered. The betrayal wasn't just about the money. It was about the principle, the silent promise of respect and partnership that Claire had broken. Determined to get answers, Lila confronted Claire at the gallery. Her voice trembled with hurt and anger as she demanded an explanation. Claire, unbothered by the confrontation, coolly dismissed Lila's accusations, framing her actions as standard business practices. She argued that her efforts in promoting Lila's work and connecting her to buyers justified the additional cut, even though it had never been discussed. The response left Lila reeling. It wasn't the justification she had hoped for. It was an admission of prioritizing profit over trust. Heartbroken, Lila knew she couldn't continue under Claire's management. Gathering what little courage she had left, she walked out, determined to forge her own path. The decision was terrifying, but it also marked a turning point. Lila realized that her success had to come from her own hands, free from manipulation or compromise. Though the betrayal stung deeply, it also fueled her resolve to build something entirely her own. Determined to take control of her future, Lila poured all her energy into starting an online art shop. She spent countless hours teaching herself the ins and outs of e-commerce, from designing a website to understanding social media algorithms. Despite her limited resources, she made do with what she had: a second-hand laptop and a smartphone with a cracked screen. Each evening, after her shifts at the diner, she would sit at her tiny kitchen table, meticulously photographing her artwork and uploading the images to her shop. She wrote heartfelt descriptions for each piece, hoping her words would connect with potential buyers. It wasn't easy. The process was slow and at times discouraging as the orders trickled in sporadically. But Lila refused to give up, believing that every small step forward was a victory. Her persistence began to pay off as word of her art spread. Lila actively engaged with her audience, sharing the stories behind her pieces and connecting with people who resonated with her work. Her honesty and passion drew in a small but loyal following, individuals who admired not just her talent, but also her resilience. Every sale, no matter how small, felt like a triumph, a tangible reminder that she could build something on her own terms. With each package she sent out, she felt a growing sense of independence, as though she was finally carving out a place for herself in the world. Slowly but surely, Lila's online shop became more than just a side project. It became a symbol of her strength and her refusal to let her circumstances define her future. One evening, as Lila was walking home after another successful day managing her online art shop, she spotted a familiar figure sitting near the old well. She froze in place, her heart racing as a mix of emotions washed over her. Confusion, anger, and curiosity. It was Mr. Bennett, looking as calm and mysterious as ever. He greeted her with his usual warm smile, as though no time had passed since their last encounter. Lila approached cautiously, her mind buzzing with questions. Before she could speak, he began to explain. In his steady, almost otherworldly tone, he revealed that he had been observing her journey. The stories about the well's magic? They were part of his carefully crafted plan to inspire belief and resilience in those who stumbled upon it. As his words sank in, Lila's emotions boiled over. She was furious. How could he play with people's hopes like that? Especially someone like her, who was already struggling under the weight of life's challenges. She demanded to know why he had targeted her, why he had interfered in such a cryptic and manipulative way. Mr. Bennett, unruffled by her anger, simply replied that he saw potential in her, a spark that needed a nudge to ignite. He admitted that his methods weren't conventional but insisted that the well had been a tool, not a trick. Though Lila was still angry, she couldn't deny the truth in his words. His intervention, as frustrating and manipulative as it had been, had pushed her to discover her own strength. As she walked away, still grappling with mixed feelings, Lila realized that, despite her frustration, she had grown stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever before. Mason, watching Lila's unwavering dedication to building her art business, began to see the possibilities of charting his own path. Inspired by her resilience and the way she turned setbacks into opportunities, he decided to put his skills with electronics to good use. From a young age, Mason had a knack for fixing broken gadgets, often tinkering with old radios and discarded phones. With limited resources but a wealth of determination, he started small, setting up a makeshift repair station in their cramped living room. Using the few tools he had collected over the years, he began offering affordable repairs to neighbors and friends, building a reputation for reliability and ingenuity. What started as a modest effort quickly gained traction. Word spread about Mason's work, and soon he was handling everything from cracked screens to malfunctioning laptops. The steady stream of clients not only helped ease the financial burden on their family, but also gave Mason a renewed sense of purpose. For the first time, he felt he was contributing in a meaningful way. His pride in his small business grew, and so did Lila's admiration for him. Their struggles had taught them to fight for their dreams, and Mason's success became a beacon of hope for their family. His achievements reminded them all that they were more than their hardships, proving that even in the face of adversity, they could carve out a better future through determination and effort. One evening, Lila was scrolling through her social media accounts, responding to comments and messages from her small but growing community of followers. She had posted a photo of one of her favorite pieces, a vivid, emotional depiction of a bird soaring above a broken cage, representing freedom and resilience. Unbeknownst to her, someone with a large following had shared the image, praising its raw emotion and artistry. Overnight, the post exploded with likes, shares, and comments from people across the globe. Notifications flooded her phone, and her once quiet accounts buzzed with activity. Lila could hardly believe her eyes as her followers multiplied and inquiries about her art poured in. The sudden attention was overwhelming but exhilarating, a whirlwind that made her feel, for the first time, that her work was truly reaching people. Among the many messages was one that stood out. A representative from a prominent arts magazine wanted to feature her in an article about emerging talent. The opportunity felt surreal as Lila shared her story during the interview, recounting her journey from sketching on diner napkins to building her own business. When the article was published, it painted her as a symbol of perseverance and creative spirit, inspiring countless readers. The exposure brought an influx of orders, commissions, and even invitations to collaborate with other artists. Lila's career surged to new heights, transforming her once small art shop into a thriving venture. Though she was grateful for the success, what touched her most was the realization that her work resonated with so many, proving that the struggles she had poured into her art could spark hope in others. One quiet afternoon, feeling reflective after her recent successes, Lila decided to revisit the old well that had once seemed like a lifeline in her darkest moments. The park was just as overgrown and quiet as she remembered, the well still partially hidden among the trees. As she approached, memories flooded back, of Mr. Bennet's enigmatic words, her desperate wish, and the uncertain journey that followed. This time, however, she felt different. She wasn't the same woman who had stood there months ago, clutching a quarter and hoping for a miracle. Her steps were steady, her heart calm. She knelt by the well's edge, tracing its weathered stones with her fingers, and something caught her eye. Faint but unmistakable, an inscription was carved into the stone. "The power you seek lies within." Lila stared at the words, the weight of their meaning settling over her. The well had never been magical. It had been a symbol, a moment for her to pause and reflect on what she truly wanted. She realized now that her journey had never depended on the well's supposed powers or even on Mr. Bennet's cryptic encouragement. The strength, resilience, and creativity that had propelled her forward had always been within her. The well had simply given her the nudge to believe in herself, to take the first step even when the path was unclear. Standing there, Lila felt a deep sense of gratitude, not for the well itself, but for the courage it had inspired in her. She smiled, whispering a quiet thanks to the place that had once been her refuge, before turning to leave, ready to continue building the life she had created with her own hands. Lila's dream of opening her own gallery became a reality when she found the perfect space in the heart of Detroit. The building was old but full of character, with large windows that let in natural light and enough room to showcase not only her work but also the creations of others. Naming it the Harper Studio, she made it a place that reflected her journey. Welcoming, inspiring, and full of hope, the gallery quickly became a hub for local talent, as Lila dedicated herself to giving up-and-coming artists the platform she had once so desperately needed. She worked tirelessly to mentor them, host exhibitions, and foster a sense of community within the space. For many, the Harper Studio became more than just a gallery. It was a beacon of possibility, a symbol of what could be achieved with determination and a belief in one's dreams. As the gallery flourished, so did Lila's family. With the financial stability her success brought, her mother's health improved, and Mason expanded his electronics business, finding a sense of pride and purpose in his work. Together, they thrived, supporting one another in ways they hadn't been able to before. The gallery also became a cornerstone of the community, hosting workshops, art classes, and charity events that brought people together. Local newspapers celebrated Lila's accomplishments, highlighting her as a Detroit success story. But for Lila, the real victory was seeing how her hard work not only transformed her own life, but also uplifted those around her. Every artist she helped, every visitor inspired by the gallery, and every connection made reminded her of why she had fought so hard to follow her dreams. Years later, on a crisp autumn afternoon, Lila found herself drawn back to the park where her journey had begun. The old well, now overgrown with ivy and softened by time, stood as a quiet reminder of the night she had whispered her first hesitant wish. This time, however, she approached not with desperation, but with a deep sense of gratitude and reflection. As she neared the well, she noticed a young girl standing by its edge, clutching a coin tightly in her small hand. The girl's face was a mixture of hope and uncertainty, her lips moving silently as if practicing a wish before she let the coin fall. The sight stirred something deep within Lila, a memory of herself from years ago, fragile and unsure yet yearning for a brighter future. Lila stepped closer, her voice soft and kind as she greeted the girl. The child hesitated, her shyness evident, but eventually admitted she was making a wish for something special. Lila smiled, her heart warmed by the familiar scene. She knelt down, holding out a shiny coin from her pocket, and placed it gently in the girl's hand. "Here," Lila said, her voice filled with the wisdom of her own hard-won journey. "Believe in yourself. That's where the real magic is." The girl looked at her, eyes wide with curiosity and wonder, before nodding and tossing the coin into the well. As Lila walked away, she glanced back to see the girl smiling, her posture a little taller, her steps a little bolder. In that moment, Lila felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, knowing she had passed on the lesson that had changed her life, planting a seed of hope in someone else's story.